have a difficult discussion today. Today, we're going to talk about how Jesus warned us of Paul, the disciple. In Mark, he talked about beware of the yeast of the Pharisees. And the disciples were thinking he's talking about bread. But on the contrary, he was talking about the Pharisees that will come later to deceive the many that were left behind while Jesus was resurrected. That's why Jesus told the disciples to wait for the Holy Spirit to dwell upon them. But meanwhile that was happening, some false teachers came in, some false apostles came in, and one of them is Paul the apostle. And Jesus warns us that there would come another in his own name that the people will accept, apart from him. And this man is Paul. And Jesus gives many warnings about him. Many warnings about Paul the disciple. And that he would come and deceive many and lead many astray, even to the destruction of the church, leaving the church divided, leaving the church confused, leaving the church full of scrambles, leaving them in full disarray because of his teachings, because of his messages, because of his gospel. This is Paul the disciple. And I read how in Acts 23:6 he calls himself a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee, according to his own words. A Pharisee, I am a Pharisee, the son of a Pharisee. And Jesus says, beware of the least of the Pharisees, of the yeast of the Pharisees, because he knew that one of the Pharisees would come up with a doctrine, with a gospel that would contradict his own gospel. Jesus said, call no man your father. But Paul says, I am your spiritual father and mother. So there's many contradictions, there's many things that Paul said that Jesus did not agree with and Jesus never condoned. Jesus did not ordain such words, and Paul was never accepted by the disciples. If Jesus was there and the disciples were there and the disciples did not receive Paul, the closest people that knew Jesus did not receive Paul, what does it say about Paul? What does it say about his statement, his gospel and his message? What does it say about a Pharisee? That Pharisees could not be trusted in the time of the apostles, in the time of the disciples. And the word apostle did not begin to be used apart from when Paul started his ministry, because he wanted to identify himself as something superior, as something better than the disciples, because of the rejection that the disciples gave. They wanted to give him an approval. He had to go through a process of approval. He had to go through an approval courtesy. But through this, James the just refused even to undergo this, because he preached a different gospel than the gospel that Jesus Christ preached. And this is the same warning Jesus gives us. Endure. This gospel shall endure. This gospel that I preach. Jesus said, this gospel that I preach, endure with it until the end of the age. Endure with it, because other people will come in and speak other things and give false messages, give false assurance, will give false admission and false submission to this gospel, thinking that they are right, thinking that they're going to actually serve this gospel, but they're going to bring in their own ways, they're going to bring in their own understanding, they're going to bring in their own schemes, their own speeches, their own content. They're going to bring their own intents, not human but demonic, saying that we have a license to sin, saying that we have grace to continue in sin. I don't understand this doctrine of grace. Grace cannot abound where sin is there. You cannot say you have grace when someone is clearly struggling with that sin. Remove that sin, and walk with God. He will give you mercy. But there is no grace to continue in sin once you've known the truth and have delivered yourself from such lies and such deception. Remove yourself from this sin and leave behind the sin completely. Leave it behind completely, or you will keep struggling with the same things over and over again. Grace is not there. You must live in the mercy of God, knowing that He is merciful, but there's a day coming, a day of judgment is coming, where all the sins you committed shall be brought to account. So where is this thing of grace? It's introduced by Paul, the Pharisee of Pharisees. It's brought to you by Paul. And this is the struggle that we have. Believing Paul or believing Jesus. Choose this day whom you will serve. Believing Paul or believing Jesus. You have this day two choices: to follow Jesus and his disciples, or follow Paul. There is only one true person, Jesus. I choose Jesus. Leave Paul behind. It even says here in Acts 26:5 that he lived as a Pharisee, adhering to the strictest sect of our religion. So that means he was very strict, meaning he found a way to kill people spiritually. He found a way to kill people spiritually. He was killing people physically, seeing that it was physical, killing them left and right. And now, since that couldn't work, he came up with an idea, with a plan, with a scheme to kill them spiritually. It was not enough to kill them mentally and physically. He wanted to kill them spiritually. He wanted to kill them spiritually so that they could not go into heaven. They could not receive the things Jesus promised. They could not receive the things Jesus wanted them to receive. The power, the Holy Spirit. He wanted them to live in grace. Living in grace means you don't carry the fullness of the Holy Spirit. You don't carry the fullness of the Holy Spirit. How can you live out the fullness of the Holy Spirit when you're living in grace? When you're having sins, when you're having a license to sin, when you're having things that are enabling you to sin. Oh, I have grace. I have grace. Jesus, Paul said, I have grace. I have grace to do this. I have grace to do that. I have grace to do this. I have grace to do that. I have a weakness. Oh, there's grace for you. My grace is sufficient for you. What kind of nonsense is that? You need to live a life of pure holiness, a life of purity, a life of consecration unto God, and know that your life is holy and that you're the temple of the living God, and that one day you shall be judged in the courts of heaven. You shall be judged for all the sin that is committed on earth.